ready, we can start. Okay. Yasmin, you have the text with you?
Yes, please.
Can you read?
Yes, of course I can read.
Okay. Today there are only 4 people.
Normally,
Yeah, go
Archana,
ahead.
he likes to read first because she leaves
She is
early.
not
But
there
this,
on the line.
yeah. Okay, so I can read. I can read, no problem.
Yeah.
This lower being begins where a veil falls between soul and nature, between spirit in supermind and spirit in mind, life and body. Where this veil has not fallen, these instrumental powers are not what they are in us, but an enlightened part of the unified action of supermind and spirit. Mind gets to an independent idea of its own action where it forgets to refer back to the light from which it derives and becomes absorbed in the possibilities of its own separative process and enjoyment. The soul, when it dwells in the principle of mind, not yet subject to, but user of life and body, knows itself as a mental being working out its mental life and forces and images, bodies of the subtle mental substance, according to its individual knowledge, will, and dynamics, modified by its relation to other similar beings and powers in the universal mind. When it dwells in the principle of life, it knows itself as a being of the universal life, working out action and consciousnesses by its desires under similar modifying conditions proper to a universal life soul whose action is through many individual life beings. When it dwells in the principle of matter, it knows itself as a consciousness of matter acting under a similar law of the energy of material being. In proportion as it leans towards the side of knowledge, it is aware of itself more or less clearly as a soul of mind, a soul of life, a soul of body, viewing and acting in or acted upon by its nature. But where it leans towards the side of ignorance, it knows itself as an ego identified with nature of mind, of life, or of body, a creation of nature. But the native tendency of material being leads towards an absorption of the soul's energy in the act of formation and material movement and a consequent self oblivion of the conscious being. The material universe begins from an apparent inconscience.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll read the para. We have read it. We'll go sentence by sentence. This lower being begins where a veil falls between soul and nature. So very clear what he's saying. Where does it come? You have a body, you have a mind, you have a vital. You have a vital and a mind. Above the mind is a veil. That is what divides you from the spirit, from your own true self. Okay. So up to the self, the spiritual planes of consciousness, you can call them the higher hemisphere. The lower hemisphere is matter, life, and mind. You have no connection with the soul or your own self. You have no connection at all when you are in this lower hemisphere of body, life, and mind. In the normal man, of course, when you develop by yoga, your consciousness will rise above the body, mind, life. Then you can get a contact with the divine and your own soul. But if you are identified with your body, mind, life, it's not possible to know the self. It may be possible to know the psychic being, but not the self. Okay? So, this is putting it in an interesting manner. The veil between your soul and nature. Which is nature? Nature is your body, mind, life. Or universally, matter, life, and mind. There is always a connection between the individual and the universe. In the universe, also, the spiritual planes begin above mind. And in human beings, if your consciousness rises above mind, then you can get a contact with your true being, but not otherwise. That's what I mean by a veil falls between soul and nature. Okay? So, know clearly that nature means your body, your mind, body, mind, and life. Between spirit in supermind and spirit in mind, life, and body, there is a veil between spirit and supermind. Supermind is using in a very general way, okay, above the mind, and spirit in mind, life, and body. Now, there is your spirit in the mind, life, and body, but you are not aware of it. That's the whole thing. He's saying very clearly that the divine is there in your body, it's a consciousness which is there in the body, mind, life. Now, one thing we must get very clear, as I read, we will explain further that there is only one consciousness. The consciousness is one only. It goes into you, it goes into me, it goes into everybody else and takes on different shapes and sizes and colors. But it is same. It's the same thing. Just like a huge amount of water is there, and when it is poured into small, small vessels, it takes on the shape and size and color of the small vessels. Exactly in the same way, the supreme consciousness enters into your mind, it becomes mind consciousness. When it enters into your vital, it is vital consciousness. When it enters into your body, it is body consciousness. Of course, the qualities are all different, but they are still this consciousness itself. Okay, so this is what you have to keep in mind. Okay, this is an important principle. Yeah. Where this veil has not fallen, these instrumental powers are not what they are in us, but an enlightened part of the unified action of supermind and spirit. What is Sendra saying? He is saying that when your consciousness rises above the mind and enters the spiritual planes of consciousness, then it is not the old ignorance at all. It's not old ignorance. You are now quite in knowledge. Your body mind life is below, but you are not living in body mind life. Your consciousness has gone up. There is a consciousness in the body, continues. There is a consciousness in the vital, and there is a consciousness in the mind. But your soul consciousness has gone to the higher level. So that is what Swami is saying. When that happens, okay, an enlightened part of the unified action of supermind and spirit, it becomes knowledge starts coming into it. Where this veil, I'm reading the sentence again, where this veil has not fallen. In other words, your consciousness has gone to the self. These instrumental powers, which are the instrumental powers? Body, vital, and mind. They are instruments. Are not what they are in us. Okay? They become different. They become now open to divine influence. These instrumental powers are not what they are in us, but an enlightened part of the unified action of supermind and spirit. You can start living a spiritual life when that happens. Mind gets into an independent idea of its own action. When it forgets to refer back to the light from which it derives and becomes absorbed in the possibilities of its own separative process and enjoyment. But when your consciousness has not gone beyond the mind, it gets its own independent idea, okay, that I am separate from everybody else. Independent idea of its own action, you feel that you are the doer. That's what he's saying. Okay? It gets the idea that I am the doer. When it forgets to refer back to the light from which it derives. What is the light from which it derives? The supermind and the spiritual planes of consciousness, and becomes absorbed in the possibilities of its own separative process and enjoyment. So when the veil is there, your ego consciousness, when you are in the identified with your body, mind, life, you are in the ego consciousness and you are thinking of the possibilities of development separately from everybody else. Separately, not including everybody. The soul, when it dwells in the principle of mind, not yet subject to, but user of life and body, knows itself as a mental being, working out its mental life and forces and images, bodies as a subtle mental substance, according to its own individual knowledge, will, and dynamics, modified by its relation to other similar beings and powers in the universal mind. So, what he's saying is that when the soul or your consciousness enters only into the mind, okay, not yet subject to, but user of life and body, knows itself as a mental being, it becomes a manomaya purusha. It becomes a manomaya purusha. Will and dynamics modified by its relation to other similar beings. Okay? In other words, your mind and my mind will be different. That's what it means. Okay? Individual knowledge, will, and dynamics modified by the relation to other similar beings, other human beings, if you are talking of man, and powers in the universal mind. When it dwells in the principle of life, okay, when the consciousness comes into the vital, it becomes the pranamaya purusha. It becomes the consciousness reduces itself and becomes part of the vital. So it becomes the pranamaya purusha. But yet it is consciousness only. Remember, the consciousness is coming down the stairs and taking on the characteristics of the lower stairs. Okay? That you keep in mind. When it dwells in the principle of mind, it knows itself as a being of the universal life, working out action and consciousness by its desire under similar modifying conditions proper to a universal life soul whose action is through many individual life beings. Why is saying individual life beings and not human beings? Because when the soul enters the vital, it is 99% the animal life. I think very rarely does a man feel that he is a pranamaya purusha. Mostly human beings think that they are the manomaya purusha. Okay? It's the animals which are pranamaya purusha. Okay? When it dwells in the principle of matter, okay, consciousness goes even into matter. Then it becomes annamaya purusha. Okay? When it dwells in the principle of matter, it knows itself as a consciousness of matter, acting under a similar law of the energy of material being. Okay? Now, what he's saying is very interesting because he's saying that the consciousness that enters into it, it knows itself as a consciousness of matter. In proportion as it leans towards the side of knowledge, it is aware of itself more or less clearly as a soul of mind, a soul of life, a soul of body, viewing and acting in or acted upon by its nature. So, you are normally, when you are in your normal consciousness, nature is acting upon you. You think that you are using nature, but actually nature is making you dance according to its own tune. Nature is acted upon by its nature. But when it leans towards the side of ignorance, it knows itself as an ego identified with nature of mind, life, and body, creation of nature. So, depends on how you are. Okay, if you are enlightened already, then you know. That means somebody is saying when you are leaning towards the side of knowledge, it's aware of itself more or less as a soul of mind. I am more mind than anything else. Okay? But then, when you are not leaning towards ignorance, you feel yourself to be an egoistic person, okay, and identified yourself as a body mind. That's what's the reason. But the native tendency of material being leads towards an absorption of the soul's energy in the act of formation and material movement and consequent self-oblivion of the conscious being. He is telling you now, first he has told us that when it enters matter, it knows itself as the soul of matter. Now he is telling you very clearly that the material universe, it is forgotten that it is the soul. In matter, it forgets that it is the soul. But the native tendency of material being leads towards an absorption of the soul's energy in the act of formation and material movement, and a consequent self-oblivion of the conscious being. Forget. The consciousness forgets that it is a conscious being. The material universe begins from an apparent inconscience. Apparent, why? Because all the consciousness is already involved in the inconscience. Life is involved in the inconscience, mind is involved in the inconscience, even the supermind is there, even involved in the inconscience, but it has forgotten that it is the supermind. That's all. Okay? Now, we can read the next one. The universal Purusha dwells in all these planes. So, next somebody else has to read. Achani is now on the line, and if she has the text and she is willing to read, she can read.
No, Rangada, I don't have the text.
Okay, you don't have the right. Then, Sunki, maybe you can read?
Yes, Rangada.
Go ahead.
The universal Purusha dwells in all these planes in a certain simultaneity and builds upon each of these principles a world or series of worlds with its beings who live in the nature of that principle. Man in the microcosm has all these planes in his own being, ranged from his subconscious to his superconscious existence. By a developing power of yoga, he can become aware of these concealed worlds hidden from his physical, materialized mind and senses which know only the material world. And then he becomes aware that his material existence is not a thing apart, and self-existent, as the material universe in which he lives is also not a thing apart and self-existent, but is in constant relation to the higher planes and acted on by their powers and beings. He can open up and increase the action of these higher planes in himself and enjoy some sort of a participation in the life of the other worlds, which for the rest are or can be his dwelling place. That is to say, the station of his awareness, Dhamma, after death or between death and rebirth in a material body. But his most important capacity is that of developing the power of the higher principles in himself, a greater power of life, a purer light of mind, the illumination of a supermind, the infinite being, consciousness, and the light of spirit. By an ascending movement, he can develop his human imperfection towards that greater perfection.
Now, Sundar is saying that although you are normally identified with your body-mind life, your consciousness can go beyond body-mind life and enter into the second level, the spiritual planes of consciousness. And when that happens, he is telling you what happens. Very interesting things can happen there. Okay. Very easy sentence. The universal Purusha. Now note that the universal Purusha is there everywhere, and he is entering all the planes of consciousness one by one. Just as I said, when he enters into matter, he becomes the Annamaya Purusha. He has forgotten that he is the divine. Okay? When he enters into the vital, the action takes place, okay, but it does not know that it is the supreme energy. Exactly the same way, mind also, when the Purusha enters the mind, it takes on the characteristics of that. It's like, if I live in India, I am subject to the Indian laws. If I am living somewhere else, I am subject to those laws. So when the Purusha enters into matter, it is subject to the laws of matter. Okay? When it enters into vital, it is subject to the laws of vital. Exactly in the same way. It loses its own supreme consciousness, it loses and becomes less. Okay? So, The universal Purusha dwells in all these places in a certain simultaneity and builds upon each of these principles a world or series of worlds with its beings who live in the nature of that principle. Now, what Sylvie is saying is very interesting. He is saying that even man, okay, Mother also has said that you think that you are living in the physical world, but part of you is there in the supermind, part of you is there in the overmind, part in the higher planes of consciousness, and but you are not aware of it. Since you are the universal, your part of you is also there at the highest level. You are nothing but the universe. So that's what he's saying. And when you are there, okay, consciously, then all sorts of interesting things can happen. But you are not there consciously. That's the whole problem. Simultaneously, note the word simultaneously. The universal Purusha dwells in all these planes in a certain simultaneity and builds upon each of these principles a world or series of worlds with its beings who live in the nature of that principle. Nature, live in the nature of the principle of matter, the consciousness becomes material. When it goes into life, it becomes vital. When it goes into mind, it becomes mental. That's what it means. And the microcosm can become the macrocosm. Huh? Remember, and the microcosm has all these planes in his own being, ranged from his subconscious to his superconscious existence. Just like universe also, he is there and he has got everything in him. But some of it he is not conscious of at all. He is conscious only of a very small range. He is neither conscious of the subconscious, inconscious, neither of the superconscious. He is aware only of a very shallow and very small section of the whole range of existence. By developing power of yoga, he can become aware of these concealed worlds hidden from his physical, materialized mind and senses. Mostly when you are identified in your body mind life, your mind is a materialized mind. And what is that? The physical mind. Remember, the physical mind is the one that makes you think that the senses are absolutely giving you the right knowledge. It is the interpreter of senses. That's the material mind, which know only the material world. So when you are identified with your material, then you feel only, it knows only the material, because the senses cannot grasp truths of the other planes. They are built only for the physical world, your senses. But there are other senses which are open to the higher planes, but you are not conscious of them. And then he becomes aware that his material existence is not a thing apart and self-existent, as the material universe in which he lives is also not a thing apart and self-existent, but is in constant relation to the higher planes and acted on by their powers and beings. So, part of you is there in the higher planes also, and you are being influenced there in the higher plane, but you don't know about it. He can open up. Now, that's interesting, because when you have a dream that you are meeting mother, okay, it's real. In that world, mother has given you something reality, but when you wake up, you have come down, you are not in that world anymore, and you think it is unreal. But it is real, subtly real. Okay. That's what Srimati is saying. But if you become conscious, even when you are identified with your body, mind, life in a normal waking consciousness, then you can see these higher realities in the higher worlds.
What happened? Ranga is stuck somewhere?
Yeah, we
And
cannot
I
hear.
was wondering, why is there silence?
Yes, yes.
I think his cell phone or some system is stuck.
Rangata,
Can
we
you hear
cannot
me now?
hear you. Yes, yes, now we can hear you.
The connection got
Rangata.
lost. Okay. Yeah. Hello.
Yes, yes, now we can hear you, Rangata.
Yeah. Now we can hear me. Okay.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, we can continue. Yes. So when you are conscious on several planes at the same time, you are a Ishvara Koti. Okay. Otherwise, you are a Jiva Koti. You are conscious only of one plane of consciousness at a time. But with yoga development, you can be conscious of the higher planes also, even while you are in the body mind life and interacting with others in the normal way. Okay. Can open up and increase the action of these higher planes in himself and enjoy some sort of participation in the life of other worlds. Best example, what can I say? Mother is saying in agenda every day, I spend some time with Sri Aurobindo. And Sri Aurobindo is not there in the physical world, he is there in the subtle world. And mother is spending some time every day with him there. Then sometimes she is going into the supramental plane and consciously, okay? So that if you remember that experience of the supramental boat, these are all higher planes, but you can go there in very, very conscious manner. Okay? And increase, can open up and increase the action of these higher planes in himself and enjoy some sort of participation in the life of other worlds. You can even participate in those worlds, which for the rest are or can be his dwelling place. That is to say, the station of his awareness, Dhamma, after death or between death and rebirth in a material body. So, this is very interesting. I told you there is a Parsi lady who wrote a very interesting book. Okay, and the laws of the subtle worlds. Okay, and she lost her two sons, and the two sons were stationed permanently in the spiritual planes of consciousness and were going on communicating with her and giving her knowledge of the physical world. So they are living there. Okay, that's what Siddha is saying. You can live there in those worlds forever if you want. That's what, and that book is a very interesting book. I went through it recently. Recently means about a year ago. And all the things that are being said there are so interesting and so real. So this lady whose two sons had died in a car accident was in constant touch with them. Okay.
Yes, Rangada, I have read that book.
Yes, tell me.
I have read that book, The Laws of Spiritual World.
Yes, that's right.
Khorshid Bhavnagri. That lady's name is Khorshid Bhavnagri.
Yes, she's a Parsi. Yeah,
Yes, Parsi
that's right.
lady. Yes.
It's very interesting. That's a perfect example of what Siddha is saying. You can live in those worlds. Okay. And he's also saying very clearly, after death or between death and rebirth. After death or between death and rebirth. In other words, after death means permanently you can live there. You don't need to take birth again. Or between death and rebirth, when the soul has not yet taken a new body, it can live there in those worlds. Just like when you die here.
How did the sons manage to be in touch with the mother?
That's an interesting question. And the mother went to a medium. She went to somebody who could be in touch with the others. And through the medium, she managed to get in touch with them. Okay. So she was not directly in touch with them, but through the medium. She was probably not capable of doing that. I don't remember the details, but maybe she was doing it through the medium. Yeah?
Rangada,
But you know,
Rangada,
Yes.
that lady, you know,
Yes.
she was disturbed first initially when her sons died. So the sons contacted the medium and they gave the message to their mother that you be still and calm. If when you be still and calm, we will be able to contact with you. You start meditating. So she
Ah.
started meditating, and then they started. Then they got connected with her.
Yeah.
And then she was doing auto writing. She used to hold the pen, and they used to write with the connect with that medium. Her sons.
That's right.
Hmm.
It's called automatic writing. Yes.
Yes,
Srinath
yes.
experimented also with that. Yes, very much. Oh,
Yes,
that's
but
right.
then Sri Aurobindo said that not to publish that book of his of automatic writing.
Yes.
And somewhere Mother has said that this sort of clairvoyance and medium and all is not 100% correct.
That's right.
There can be a
That's what
lot of
Srinath
error.
concluded. Yeah.
So
But it
whatever
can be.
was
Yeah, go on.
so whatever was recorded by this lady, how authentic is it?
Oh, I read the book and it tallies perfectly with all that Mother and Srinath say. So largely it is true. Largely. Maybe something, small things here and there may not be true. Because they are not speaking with words. Huh? They are speaking only through vibrations. And the mother is noting down in words. So there can be a distortion. But mostly it is very correct. Mostly. Some places did feel a little strange. Okay? Very few places felt a little strange. But mostly it was very correct. And also, it tallied with many videos that we are seeing about people who die and come back into their body again. The near-death experience, very similar experiences are there. Okay? So let's finish the para. Okay, so that is to say, so, or can be his dwelling place. That is to say, the station of awareness, dhamma, after death or between death and birth. So after death, permanently, between death and birth, before you have taken a new body, you are in the physical, without a body, you are there, you can be in those worlds. But his most important capacity is that of developing the powers of higher principles in himself. That's the interesting part. You can develop yourself. Those higher principles which are there, you can develop in yourself. It requires a little bit of effort, but that's exactly what happened. Srinath says that when he had the experience of the nirvana, he found it in the beginning difficult to bring down that peace into his normal consciousness. But finally, after trying repeatedly, he could do that. That's exactly what Srinath is referring here. You can build in yourself the powers of the higher world in your normal lower world. You can build. In other words, if you are not very peaceful in the beginning, but now you have had experience with the higher peace, you can become very as peaceful as when you are up there. That's what Srinath mentioned. Okay, so, of developing the powers of the higher principles in himself, a greater power of life, a purer life of mind, an illumination of supermind, the infinite being, consciousness and delight of spirit. You can develop all these things. That is how Srinath knew about the supermind. He had not achieved the supermind, but he knew about it by contact. Okay. By an ascending movement, he can develop his human imperfection towards a greater perfection. That is what. But whatever his aim, however exalted his aspiration. Today I have noted down, I have not been noting down correctly. Today I will note down. Okay. Au revoir.
How, excuse me,
Yes, go ahead.
how does one move one's consciousness from one plane to another?
Can you repeat that question, Yasmin?
How can one move one's
Connection is gone. Connection is weak.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, now I can hear you. Yeah.
How can one move one's consciousness from one plane to another?
By development, by yoga, it becomes possible. Now it is not possible for us, but that's exactly what Srimdev is saying. You can develop that capacity.
But how does one develop by yoga? What? What's the protocol like? Like
There are
in
different-
maths, you start with addition, minus, then multiply, then divide. But here, like even mother said that she used to travel from here to there by shifting her consciousness. But you don't know only where's your consciousness, then how can you shift it?
That is when you are not doing yoga. But when you start doing yoga, you come to know all these things. The first thing you come to know is your consciousness and your soul. Now we are not conscious and we cannot do anything. But when the consciousness develops, then all these things become possible. Exactly like, exactly like in athletics. I can't do a certain amount of high jump or pole vault, but by constant practice and will, it can be done. You become much better at your own by practice. And practice of what? Each religion, each yoga has a different technique. Each one has got a different technique. So it depends on which yoga you are selecting for yourself. The process is not fixed. It can be done through any yoga. There are any number of yogas. 6, 7 yogas in India itself. Okay. Jnana yoga, bhakti yoga, kriya yoga, okay. Hatha yoga, Raj yoga, integral yoga.
Tantric
Then-
also.
Yeah, tantric yoga, so many different types. Okay.
Yeah, got it. But still, mother made it sound so simple when she taught Andre that you
Got it
must.
in theory, Yasmin.
Huh?
Got it in theory. Got it in theory now.
Yeah, only in theory. Practice is zero.
That's what I'm saying. Got it in theory. In practical, we need lives. Huh?
Okay.
Merci beaucoup.
Okay. I'm cutting the link.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rangada.
Bye, Rangada. Thank